This is Where Did the Road Go? Our aim is to explore the fringe, to be true skeptics and question openly, to investigate the paranormal, bring light to the dark corners of history, and give a voice to the shunned of science. We deal in mystery and the important questions that these subjects bring to light. What is reality? Who are we? And why are we here? Join us on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com for a full show archive, links to all our social media, upcoming schedule, and much, much more. Now, join your host Soraya on this week's edition of Where Did the Road Go?
And you're listening to a live edition of Where Did the Road Go, at least if you're listening on WVBR. And that's not what I want, that's what I want. All right. And, yes, tonight we're going to be talking with Mike Clelland, no stranger to the show, but finally we get to talk about his book, The Messengers, Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. And, yeah, we're just going to jump right into this. So let me bring Mike in here. Hello, Mike.
Hello.
It's been a little bit since we've had you on.
A few weeks, yeah.
Yeah, a few weeks.
I don't know why. I mean, I can't remember when. I mean, it was what are we up to? We've been doing the history of the...
Yeah, part 72 of the history of UFOs, and that was at least
we're up to
a few months
the
ago.
80s or something now, I think. Or
no, I think we're still in the 90s.
We're past the X-Files.
90s. Yeah, yes, we're past the X-Files. And so your book is finally out.
It is finally out. Yes,
I don't remember if it was out last time you were on.
It's been out for a couple episodes that we've been on with Aaron.
All right.
And I've subtly tried to plug it a little bit, like shamelessly, just kind of make sure that I slide that in. In the book, I write about this little thing. So.
And that's what you should do. It's a great book. It is as good as I had high expectations, and it met them.
Oh, that makes me feel great.
And one of the things about this book is it's not like other books on UFOs. This is not the typical, this report, that report. You have done something very different with it. You have, and of course everyone knows you as the owl guy because you were collecting, stories on owls, both connection to UFOs and not. But you've kind of created this synergy between them where they kind of blend into one another. It's not... Here's an owl report and here's a UFO report and this person saw an owl and also a UFO, but they almost blend at a certain point.
I actually started typing. UFO and owl both have 4 letters. And I can't tell you how many times I typed them wrong. When doing it. Like I'll say it. I bet you I do it before the show's up. I'll say like, well, when this owl report came in, I mean UFO report. They are eerily similar in more ways than just 3 letters. Owls fly silently and UFOs are reported to fly silently. That just on just a simple level, there is a thought experiment, and I say this in the book quite clearly, as a thought experiment, I wanted to blend them in a way and because my sense is that there's sort of the premise of the book in a way is that owls and UFOs have a similar power. If you see a UFO, it can have a profound impact on you as an individual, as the observer. The same is true of owls. I mean, when someone sees an owl and they come in and say, "Well, I saw an owl," they're not talking about they saw a bunny rabbit on the side of the road. It's usually like dripping with some sort of like drama. Owls are really intense, and everyone recognizes that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you just talking to you had made me pay more attention to what was happening around my sightings of owls and UFOs, for that matter, and realizing that the UFOs I saw, the major UFOs I saw, always happened around major turning points in my life.
Oh, interesting. Now just fill me in.
Oh well, we can.
You can't just.
Well, the really big UFO I saw over the lake over. Cayuga Lake? Yeah, Cayuga Lake, here just north of Ithaca, coming to the radio station one night, but long before I was doing Where Did the Road Go. This was around 2000, I think, and this was literally probably the biggest turning point in my life. Everything had changed around that point, and there was this enormous UFO, and there was nothing really to it other than the fact that it was an enormous UFO. I couldn't identify what it was or anything. There was no Oz factor. There was nothing associated with it. It was just a very bizarre sighting. And until you said what was happening around that time, and I went, I'm not really sure. And I went back and looked and went, oh yeah, there was a lot going on there.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. That's my sense, that it's not as simple as just, I'm certainly sure there are cases where it's just, people happen to sight a UFO, but my sense is that these things are staged for the individual.
Or deeply connected with the individual.
Exactly. Maybe even permeating up from the individual, manifesting them. This gets into the Kirby Surprise territory. Did you ever interview Kirby Surprise?
I have not.
Well, he'd be great on your show. Yeah. So he's a really interesting guy, and there's a whole chapter in the book where I talk with him, and he wrote a book called Synchronicity, and he has a very interesting take on the source of synchronicity, which I think is fascinating.
Well, he believes it comes from within. It comes from us.
It's generated by the observer, yeah. So,
and it's very definitely a possibility, but it also plays into what reality is.
In order to go down that road, you have to loosen up your reins on how you frame reality. Yeah.
Now, talk about the maybe people first, and because this is a term you use a lot in the book, and people I don't think we talked about it last time you were on.
The maybe people, that was a term I wrote an essay a few years ago, and I just kept on, and the essay was the foundation for this book. So the essay is about 40 pages long, and the book is about 400 pages long. So the essay is, I just took that essay and, inflated it 10 more times, and it became the book in some sense. So what I was running into is I would have people say, oh yeah, I had this interesting owl and UFO experience. And then they would say, oh, this happened, and I saw the owl, and then shortly thereafter I saw a UFO fly over, and then I would kind of, press them a little bit and say, oh, you have any abduction experiences? And they'd say no. And then they would say things like, well, but I've had a spiritual awakening, and I'm now a Reiki healer, and I have dreams where I float through the wall of my bedroom and stuff like that. So they say the things that I feel a UFO abductee would say. I don't know, for the listeners, one of the things that shows up in the book is the Reiki healing thing. I cannot believe how many people who've had these owl UFO experiences also do Reiki healing. And not to say that they're connected directly, but it's just, so when someone says, oh, I've had, an owl UFO encounter, I just kind of wait a little bit for them to drop the Reiki bomb, and sure enough, it always comes along. Not always, but so people will. I talked to enough people that would say the kinds of things that an abductee would say, and but I couldn't. Maybe if I had a huge budget of $100 million and a staff of hypnotherapists and lie detectors, and we could do a exhaustive research on every individual, I might be able to say, I probably wouldn't even, maybe a little closer to saying whether someone was an abductee or not, but there's no real way to conclusively say that. It's up to the individual themselves to say it about themselves. But what I found was people were saying the kinds of things that an abductee would say, but when I asked them, are you an abductee? They would say no. And let me just, as an aside, the term abductee is so loaded, so heavy with baggage that I am hesitant to use it. The only reason I do use it is because the word we're stuck with. So it's almost as if there's just one tier below abductee. And if I had to use another synonym for maybe people, curiously, it's like seeker. Like a lot of these folks that I'm talking to are, they're reading, interesting books on philosophy, and they've gone to meditation retreats and stuff like that. So it's an interesting pool of people. So the maybe people is a sort of shorthand for someone who cannot be conclusively categorized, even by themselves, as an abductee. So it's easy for me to leave it a little more open-ended rather than try to pigeonhole someone.
Now, but why, how can I put this? Why use that experience, the UFO abduction experience, as the core, what if that's just another shade of the experience that some people need and other people don't? AKA, they may never need to be an abductee. Maybe they're getting what people get out of that experience out of different experiences.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah, there. So, seeing a UFO, forces someone to think deeply about, like the nature of reality and our place in the universe. So, maybe that's all it takes.
Right. So I guess the thing is, they don't really need to be maybe people. They may not maybe abducted, but maybe the abduction thing isn't necessary for some people to achieve that same effect.
Yeah. So what's the word? Here's the thing, though. I'll tell you what happened is, so I did the book and then did the essay a few years ago, and then little by little, like I'm in touch with these folks and they get back to me, and then, little by little, I'm going to say a lot of them. I don't have any kind of majority or anything like that. It's all anecdotal in my own mind, but I'll tell you a lot of them have come back to me and said, like I feel like I've done more research in myself, or I had this follow-up experience, and a lot of these maybe people have come back to me and said, yeah, I'm an abductee.
Okay. All right.
Or they feel strongly, or they suspect strongly they are an abductee. And that was kind of my sense too. Like, early on in my own stuff, I had memories of it from childhood that were pretty telling, missing time and seeing close-up UFOs and literally seeing gray aliens in the yard. I was a young adult at that point. And I would have denied it. I denied it with a kind of, the energy I put into denying it is remarkable in hindsight.
And it was owls that brought you out of that, as we have talked about in previous interviews with you.
Yeah.
But we'll get into your own experiences a little later on. Because there's a lot of stuff I want to get to, and you have packed this book with different ideas and different perspectives here, and one of the main ones, of course, is that owls can be screen memories for the abduction experience, which is something a lot of UFO researchers believe. And that started with, did that come out essentially through communion?
It's really interesting that I've been searching, right? You do what do you call it, a database search, and I never did it formally. I just kind of did it, off my library shelf and through the internet's been amazing for that kind of thing. But the oldest reference I have to an owl being a screen memory for a contact event comes out of Communion, which was published in '87, which is now soon to be, what's that going to be, 30 years ago now? Yeah. So
Whitley was the first one to kind of make that connection.
Well, he was the first one to put it in print.
Right. I'm
quite certain researchers have had it in their files and notes, but up until that point, it was really only a very few people who were doing abduction research. It would have been, Leo Sprinkle and Bud Hopkins and a few others. So that account, which shows up early in the book Communion, Whitley Strieber had the what is now would call alien abduction, and his story is a little blurry. It doesn't fit the textbook perfectly. And he had an event where the morning after the contact experience, I think that would have been December 26, 1985. The morning after, he told his wife Anne, he said he thought it was an owl flying around the house, like there was an owl in the house. And then he kind of softened that a little bit because he just thought that was so absurd. He said the owl must have been on the windowsill looking in the window, and he knew exactly the window it was looking in the bedroom. And so him and his wife looked there. So this is wintertime, and there had been snow, but there had no new snow for a few days. So if there had been an owl on that windowsill, there would have been footprints in the snow. And when he was very poetic and very heavy with his drama when he says things. He said when he saw there was no footprints in the snow, he knew that something much more bizarre had taken place because he felt convinced there was an owl looking in that window. So that this, and also now the quintessential screen memory would be someone's driving down the road at night, they see a 4-foot tall owl, right? They turn a corner, there's a 4-foot tall owl. They're like, oh my goodness. And then they somehow arrive home that night, let's say 2 hours late. So they have missing time in conjunction with seeing an owl, an unusually large owl. Oh, let me say an impossibly large owl. Under hypnosis, the regressionist might say, now describe this owl, and the person being hypnotically regressed might say, well, it's got a bald head and it's got big black eyes and it's got a little uniform on, and so the implication is that the quintessential gray alien, the classic gray alien that we're all familiar with now, is somehow using a form of mind control or some sort of hypnotic projection. I don't know what the mechanism is, how it works, but that's in that they are using that to hide themselves. Now, it's not just owls. I mean, obviously, so you ask the UFO researcher, do you have the abduction researcher? Do you have any accounts of owls in your research? And they'll go, oh yeah, and then they'll rattle off a whole bunch of examples of a screen memory, and at a certain point, like I was very eager to move beyond that, so I put that chapter early on in the book, and then return to it a little bit in the way it was written, but the much more interesting thing to me is like the weirder stuff when real owls show up. So yeah.
And I think when you initially said that to me, I was like, I don't really understand why that would matter. If it's a real owl, it doesn't have any kind of like paranormal connotations, but it's the synchronicity behind it that gives it the power, and the number of stories you collected in this book of people who have seen obviously real owls in very weird situations or with such perfect timing. And I mean, you have a lot of that yourself, where they show up at such perfect places. They seem to be completely real owls. They don't seem to be hiding some kind of other entity or anything. But and the thing about a synchronicity is it's not just it's a meaningful coincidence. It's something that triggers something in you, and you collect so many of these stories with owls that just trigger off stuff in people. Yeah, and I literally, some of the stories are owls telepathically communicating, and other stories are, people who actually like make a plea. They say, I want to see an alien. Today's the day I'm going to see an alien. They know it. And then they go walk in the woods and see an owl instead. I have a couple examples of that, which I think that's just fascinating to me. Because it's pretty rare to see an owl in full daylight. And that's what people are accounting. That's, so. Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes just seeing an owl is a weird experience. They sometimes just come across as surreal.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they just have an eerie head movement and everything, yeah.
I remember driving, and I don't think I even recorded when this happened, but I was driving home one night, and I had this big truck right on top of me, behind me, and there was a large owl sitting on the edge of the road. And I was like, oh, and I didn't want to slam on the brakes because there was this huge truck right behind me. And the owl took flight right before I got to it, flew directly up over me, and then it must have just nicked the truck. And all I could see in my rear, as I looked in my mirror, is the owl just spiraling off into space.
Oh, that's terribly sad.
Yeah, and I was like, that just didn't even seem real, I mean, because why was it sitting in the road to begin with? And then just watching it disappear like that was very bizarre. I'm sure it was a real owl, but now you make me wonder, was anything else weird happening around that time period? Were there some kind of change going on in that time period? And like I said, I don't know that I recorded it, so.
And just, owls do get hit by windshields a lot, and they're pretty common to find owls dead on the side of the road, obviously hit by a car. Right. So, I mean, there's, there's owls get hit by cars with absolutely no paranormal strings attached to that, so.
You have a story in there about a guy who actually had one fly right alongside him. A very long, weird story about the wing of the owl actually touching him.
That was a powerful story for me to hear. That happened at a UFO conference, and the fellow contacted me in the hallway of this conference in Arizona and took me aside and said, "Listen, I've got an owl story for you." And I'm like, great. So, and I just had the sense, man, just as soon as I saw this guy, I was like, this is going to be this. So we sat down at the bar, and I ordered a glass of wine. He ordered a beer, and we just he told me the story, and he would just kind of, so that story, I guess I should just tell it in its entirety here.
Sure.
I'm cautious to tell that one because it is sort of the culmination of the book in a way. That's like the grand story, the grand finale of all owl stories in the book.
Well, if you don't, I mean, people can read the book to get all the details if you just want to go over the basic idea of it.
So he initially he started his story, and I was like, "Where's he going with this?" And he said, "I'm buddy of mine had this book. It's called The Seven Arrows. I have it. I haven't read it. I just bought it because he mentioned it. Says, guy's got this book, The Seven Arrows. It's an Indian folk tales and stuff like that. And in that book, it describes how to find your totem animal. And so this guy, he's up in northern Montana, and he's doing tree counting. You go through the forest, and the lumber companies have leases on, and you just go through and count the number of trees there. So he's all alone in the forest, and he's walking, doing this, kind of mindless, work in a beautiful environment. And he takes has his book with him, and he takes a little nap in the afternoon and reads the book, and then he kind of gets sleepy. But it's right at the point when he gets to how to find your totem animal. Right, so it's how to find your totem animal, and then he's like, I'm a little sleepy, so he lays on his back and he opens the book up. Right, he's got the book open on his heart. Right, you can imagine that you're lying on your back. I'll just set the book on my chest. So the book is open, folded open on his heart. He's asleep, and the next thing he knows, he's got this horrible smell right in his nose, and there's this big wet breathing right in his nose. And he's like, oh crap, something's he just pretends like he's asleep. And then he hears these big, heavy footsteps kind of lumbering away, and he opens his eyes, and there's a grizzly bear walking away from him. And so, it's kind of well, I guess I found my totem animal, right? So he hands the book off to this fellow. I think I give him a pseudonym. I think it's Jonathan. Is that right? I think it's Jonathan. Yeah. So Jonathan takes the book, and the same book, exactly the same book, and he's sending it home, and he gets to the part about the totem animal. Same part in the book, and he's just about to read it, and there's a knock at the door, and it's his friend who says he needs to move some furniture, and he's had some stuff in the garage, and this guy wants it out of the garage, so he's like, great, I'll drive you to the place where you're going to be moving, so let's get the stuff out of the garage. So they load up the van, and they drive off, but he carries the book along with him, so he sets the book with it on the dashboard of the car, with the page folded on how to find your totem animal, and as he's driving, and it's summertime up in Montana, and he's got his window rolled down, and there's a lake there right next to him. There's his car behind him, and the car's kind of close, so the headlights are kind of shining in from behind him. And all of a sudden he sees this thing out of the peripheral vision, and there's this thing flying in towards the car, and eventually it gets right up to the edge of him and flies alongside the car along the open window. And he can look in the side view mirror and look into the eyes of this owl. And he says it's just lit beautifully by the car behind him. And he's fascinated. And then literally the owl touches his temple and rubs his temple. And then flies off. And he says he gets this electric tingle sensation when it rubs his temple. Now, we sit a little bit longer, and he kind of says, he pointed to his eye, and he said, I was losing my vision in this eye, and then the doctors weren't sure why, and there was something, and they were worried they did an x-ray, and there was something in my brain, and they worried I had cancer. So they went in and did a operation and took this out. This is what they thought was cancer. And when they removed it, it was very unusual. It was an undeveloped fetus. It was a little embryo, a little tiny human embryo in his brain, and he realized it was this, and he felt it was this the doctors knew exactly what it was. It's a very rare thing that happens on occasion, where twins will be conceived, and somehow one of them will subsume the other one, and so that was his twin that had never been born. He had subsumed it. He had grown around this twin, and the twin was just stunted, and the fetus was then impacted into his brain. And he had then went on to explain all these wild psychic experiences he had with his sister, literally being able to talk with her. And he said as soon as they pulled her out of his head, like he would have been a young man at the time, all that a majority of that psychic stuff disappeared, though he still gets an occasional psychic flash, which he takes very seriously. Now, so he sits there and he points to the little spot, next to his eye on his temple. He says, see that spot right there? That's the scar where they took my sister out. That's where the owl touched me, right on that spot. And I was just like, oh my God, it was so powerful.
Yeah.
And there's more to that story too. And it's an amazing kind of, how to say it? I mean, and then this guy has also had UFO experiences, which is just, and now here's his UFO experience. He had to make a very, very, a big decision. Like, am I gonna act one way or the other? It had to do with a trial, and he meditated on it, thought about it. And then the night before he had to actually make a decision, there was a hovering UFO across the street, and it was covered in the news in the town he lived in, hovering above the building across the street from him, plain as day, so he could see it through the doorway of his front door. And yeah, how do you back engineer all that? You know what I mean? How do you step back and kind of say who was writing the script of reality for all of that to take place?
Yeah. It sounds like a movie.
It sounds like a movie that the executive producer would have to walk into the scriptwriter's room and say, guys, come on, this is a little far-fetched.
Fair enough.
So,
sounds like a very symbolic movie. That's what it sounds
and
like.
yeah, this guy was more tapped into the symbolism of the owl than almost anyone I've ever encountered. So,
let's talk about hypnosis for a moment.
Hey, I just want to say, you know what? There's almost no hypnosis in this book.
That's true. That is true. But there are people who recover some memories through hypnosis on here. And it's been a...
I'll give you an example. Let me know, who was it? Because I've been making this claim that...
What do you mean?
Who in the book gets memories
no. Just as a general thing with UFO encounters.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not saying in the book itself. You seem to stay away from them for the most part in the book.
And not on purpose. It just happened. I didn't even realize it until the book was over. I'm like, oh my God, this is a book with UFO Abductee right on the cover, and there's no transcript from a hypnotic regression.
There isn't, is there? There are.
There's a few people in there that say, including myself, I guess, is that say, I did go through hypnotherapy, but nothing really came up. It didn't work. So that shows up a few times in the book there. So.
What are your thoughts on the use of hypnosis to recover these things?
Okay, I'm not debating Paul Kimball. Am I right now? No. He's not secretly in the room with you right now, is he?
No, not that I'm aware of. But if he is, he's hiding really well.
Okay, and he'll burst out as soon as I say this. I figure my sense is, so I feel like I can say, having done this book, that I am in one form or another a UFO abduction researcher. I have talked to, I don't know how many hundreds of people at this point that have had the abduction experience in their life, the direct contact, that's a better way to say it perhaps, the direct contact experience. And I would be hesitant to put a percentage on it as far as how many of these people have had hypnosis, and I'm going to put it around maybe 2% have had hypnosis.
Okay.
Of that 2%, probably half of it would say, not much came up. It was kind of interesting, but, I don't trust it. Some people say, oh, it was really powerful. Yeah, I had this really clear image and stuff like that. But very few of them take it as dogma. What emerged in hypnosis is really what happened. I think that's that myth has been created by books by Bud Hopkins, who I love. And I don't think he didn't do that out of a deceptive thing or anything like that. So my sense is that the majority of the stuff you need to hear about UFO contact can come from waking consciousness. Can come from just the person who claims the experience can just tell what they remember, and boy, that's going to give you plenty to go on. You don't need to go under hypnosis. That said, I think it can be a useful tool. But it is not the only tool in the toolbox, and if you depend on it as the only tool in the toolbox, then, I could see very easily, what's the term? Like not painting yourself into a corner, but like the overall image is going to get painted in a way that that may not reflect what really and truly happened. You might want to cling to it as something that really and truly happened, and I think that would be a mistake. But I think it can be used to great, I think it can be used very effectively as one tool of many.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. One of the things you talk about in the book, and it's a very interesting idea, is that the owls themselves are somehow drawn to UFOs, or whatever UFOs are, is somehow emitting a frequency that draws owls in, that they're somehow affected by it.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I that covered that early on in the book, and I kind of moved beyond that at a certain point. Now, it's a really fascinating idea. It really, So if you had to pick the one animal on Earth, right, that would be perfect for seeing, let's say, I could. Let's say someone invents a really fancy camera that like takes Carillion photography. The pictures you see of the auras around people that highlighting. If someone had one of those cameras and just happened to catch a photograph of a flying saucer, let's just suppose that the flying saucer is emitting an aura, and that this specialized camera could pick it up.
Okay.
Right. So,
sort of like infrared cameras do.
Exactly, or any number of high tech cameras. I'm sure there's cameras that pick up gamma rays and stuff like that too.
Sure.
So, if there is one animal on Earth that would have the genetic, or how would you call it, the biological capability for picking that up, for sensing that, for seeing that, that would be the owl. Has this amazing night vision, and has eyeballs literally shaped in a different way than any other animal. I'm sure that is, so we as most animals have eyeballs, right? They're spheres, they rotate, so we have the ability to like hold our head still, but we can still look right and left with our eyes. Owls can't do that. Owls' eyes are locked in place. That gives them that weird eerie stare. They can only look directly forward. They cannot move their eyes side to side. That movie, Guardians of the something or other, that with the computer-generated owls that were flying around, and they all spoke with British accent. And do you know the one I'm talking about? Came out a few years ago.
Not offhand.
Oh, yeah. Someone's gonna have to remember this name. It was Guardians, or the Guardians of something. Sort of a kids movie with these owls. They could look both ways. Their eyes were moving. Drove me crazy when I watched it. Like, don't do that. They can't do that. So but what that allows is there's a different shape of the eyeball. The eyeball is not shaped like a sphere that can rotate. It's more shaped like a elongated kind of mushroom, let's say, with a mushroom head at each end. And what that allows is much more photoreceptors in the receiving end, and a much bigger lens in the collecting end, right? So, so that it gives the owls an amazing night vision, unbelievable night vision. So one way to people say, like all of a sudden I saw this owl, and the next thing I knew, a UFO flew over. Was the owl somehow drawn to the event by this heightened ability to see? They also have very good ears. Is a UFO emitting a frequency like a giant dog whistle?
Right.
Right. That somehow brings maybe the owls are nothing more than curious and just want to show up at the moment of a UFO event.
And that doesn't limit what the UFO could be. It could be a natural phenomena. It could be an energy phenomena. It could be a physical craft. But whatever it is might be emitting some kind of field.
Exactly, but then you have the question of Jonathan. When he was reading that book, so when he had that owl touch his temple, he had that Native American book, The Seven Arrows, on how to find your totem animal, on the dashboard of the car with the page, sort of dog-eared and folded on how to find your totem animal. That was like was within touching distance of his hand as he was driving.
And I think
how does the owl do that if it's so
I think the problem is people who haven't had any experiences like this will dismiss them because they've never had an experience that strikes them in this way, and they don't really understand it because they haven't experienced it. And I think once you have an experience that connects you to something else, that sort of spiritual experience, it doesn't have to be religious, but that I'm sure that owl touching his face like that came across as a spiritual experience to him.
Absolutely, yeah. Changed him, transformed him, yeah.
Right. And it's hard to bridge that gap with people who maybe don't have the framework to understand these experiences. But I think once you get into these experiences, things become very morphic. Your understanding of reality is changed in such a way, because realistically, an owl shouldn't have been able to do what he did to this guy, to Jonathan there.
Well, an owl could certainly fly near a window of a moving car and in a way that would touch his head, but the fact that it happened at that moment, at that time, and yeah, it's just...
And wasn't it staring at him as it was doing it?
Sure, yeah, but exactly, staring at him through the side view mirror, yeah.
There was also the story you told of the woman that the owl prevented her suicide.
Yes, you're picking the good ones. Yeah, you're picking the heavy-handed ones here. Yeah, so this came to me in an email, and it was one of those emails that said, that started off, which anyone who does this kind of research, I suspect, gets these correspondence where they come in a written letter, and in present day they'd be coming more often in an email. Hi, I've never told this story to anyone, but I need to share it with you. And this has no UFOs in it, but it has everything to do with the content of the book. She's now a grandmother, and at the time she was a teenager. She would have been 17 years old, and she was driving to a spot that she had picked out, and she was planning to commit suicide. So she in the car with her, she had a hose that she was going to take from the tailpipe into the cab of the car, and she even had a pillow that she could lay her head down. So she was severely depressed and was about to end her life. She's driving, and she describes it as it was snowing and the roads were sloppy, and she was driving, getting very close to the spot, turn off in the road in the woods where she was going to do this. And as she was approaching that, she had to slow down, and an owl flew right up to the windshield. She came to a complete stop, and the owl hovered there, and they locked eyes. She said it was like for 15 seconds, and then the owl flew off, and she said she had a good cry and turned around and went home, and she's still here. She in no way, she is very clear that owl saved her life. That owl turned her back from the precipice of committing suicide. And now this is interesting, and I didn't put this in the book, but a couple people have told me since then, which I didn't really know, is they said owls don't hover. Owls can't hover like a hummingbird. So if this owl, if she locked eyes for 15 seconds at a dead stop in a car, it doesn't match what a real owl can do.
Right.
Maybe it was 5 seconds, and she, it was so powerful, it kind of in her memory turned into 15 seconds. I can't answer any of that. But what I can say is that, she was very clear that the experience itself was transformative.
You called the book The Messengers. And I think stuff like that, it fits perfect with that title. And I got letter after letter where people would just kind of insert that, people would just say it, this was a messenger, and then or they would say, the owl showed up and this thing happened, and then it was that messenger. They would just call the owl the messenger. So it seems like that was once I was wondering whether I had a couple ideas on what to call it. I was going to call it, but that one really it was just a nice fit, and that's the ancient lore of the owl. Also, it's a messenger bringing messages from the other realms. Yeah, and you cover in the book quite a bit of the mythology around the owl, as well as just the physical traits. You have a chapter devoted to some of the physical traits of the owl. And if I remember right, in the past you said that was a lot longer when you originally wrote it, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, who is actually, I think it was even Red Pill Junkie was kind of like, has he been on your show?
Yeah, he's on all the time.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, yes. So he was like, oh my God, like, oh, it's so boring, and I was like, oh God, okay. So it was like about, so what these little small chapters, the owl physiology chapter, I think I got a different name for it, but it was initially just called the owl physiology chapter, and that I had to really just brutally axe it off. I'm happy to say that the full owl physiology chapter is online. So if you are into science, that was like the very first thing I wrote. I was like, when I do this book, I want to have an owl chapter, and I want it to read like a really tidy, like New Yorker article, like really engaging and interesting stuff about owl physiology. And it was, so I was like quoting scientists, and there's some really cool stuff, right? So the scientists, they take a all black room, and they get some owls, and so the room can be made totally light tight, right? So there's just a minimum amount of light, so much so that it's imperceptible to the human eye, but it's enough light that an owl can see. So they let a little mouse, it's like a gymnasium, right? So the owls are up in the rafters, and then they'd let a mouse go in the gymnasium floor, and the owl would catch it every single time in light so low that we couldn't perceive it, right? So the owl would be able to catch the owl 100% of the time when they let the mouse out on the gymnasium floor. Now, when they close that light down to absolute zero, absolute black, the owl would still be able to catch the mouse 75% of the time. That's remarkable, right? What is it?
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, the owl has a good fix on the height of the floor versus the, but it was the hearing. So that was kind of the experiment where they realized, like, wow, it's a combination of the night sight and the hearing, and that one little detail I loved. And then they did a little thing where they because they realized it's the kind of rustling noise. So they tied a piece of string to the tail of the mouse, and then they put a piece of like a little piece of paper on the end of that string. So when the mouse would run across the floor, the paper would make the crinkling noise, and then the owl would catch the paper, which I love. I just love the fact of the thought of scientists like with a little string tying the thing to the tail of a mouse. But it was, and that's in the book. Those little anecdotes are in the book. That chapter was much longer. So and I really trimmed it down, but that was important to just that owls are, even without all the paranormal stuff, owls are pretty darn fascinating animals. That eyeball stuff I was talking about earlier shows up in there too.
Yeah, and I think you led that into the idea that owls could be drawn to these UFO experiences and stuff. I didn't even come across that idea until after writing that essay. It became so clear to me as I was writing the essay. I was like, holy crap, this is like, they have crazy perfect hearing and crazy perfect eyesight, and yeah. So, what was I just going to say? So you kind of mesh together these spiritual experiences with owls, these massive synchronicities, which we really haven't gotten into yet, and the UFO phenomenon. But it seems like the synchronistic stuff and the owls don't tend to have negative backlashes to people, whereas the UFO element can. It seems like a lot of people who have abduction experiences, they're not pleasant experiences necessarily. Sometimes they evolve into that, but if they are kind of meshed together, why is there a difference there, do you think?
There's a few dark stories in the book. There's one story I didn't, there was an abductee. I didn't put this in the book. I wrote it up, and it was just never made it in. But the very first abductee I talked with it extensively. And he has an account of driving home with a friend, and there was an owl flew across the windshield of the car. And right away he said, "Oh, this is bad. This is bad." And he ended up getting really sick and getting right near death. And from something totally like a normal sickness, he got a normal, I think it was a systemic infection. Now, he's fine now. But I mean, there are these dark stories. There's another woman, Chris Holly, who I talk about in the book, has had some dark experiences with owls.
But those seem more like bad omens.
Yeah. So, but I'll tell you, from what I've collected, which is, like my data pool is totally skewed, because I've got this website, that's all about UFOs and owls and stuff. So people are finding me through that. So, but from the data that I have collected, which is skewed and not objective, it's but the good stories far outnumber the bad stories, or the benign stories far outnumber the negative stories, and I have no idea why that is. So it's interesting. The book itself, doing the research of the book, has created a sense of, I don't want to say it's a peace almost in my mind as far as what the overall UFO thing may be.
Do you worry sometimes that because you're a little biased, that you're making connections that just aren't there?
If I'm sure I do. Oh, I'm sure I do. And there's a few points in the book I say it. Like I basically, I cannot tell you how many times I've put, seems. I write this. This seems to have the feel that perhaps maybe, I can't know for sure, but this is one way to speculate about it. Yeah, I mean, I give myself every conceivable out anytime I do that. So I'm not making any bold statements in the book. I'm dancing around those by including the little caveats in the sentence that allow me some wiggle room. I am absolutely certain I've connected dots that didn't need to be connected. And I say as much in the book, that I'm cautious to how I frame this stuff.
Okay. The 4-foot owls are pretty interesting experience, and that seems you came across quite a few of those. Unbelievable
amount, yeah.
And there are no 4-foot owls.
There are no 4-foot owls. If an owl is 3 foot tall, it's really interesting because this is straight Google research, and it's funny because when they measure an owl, it's not a standing owl; it's from the nose to tail in flight. That's how they measure the height of some of these animals. So you just Google research. 33 inches is the biggest owl I could find, recorded like in online in a birding book and stuff like that. And there's a little bit of variation when you jump from birding book to birding book, and that would be the North American great gray owl, which is also in all around the northern hemisphere. So the great gray owl is also in Asia and stuff too, in northern Russia and such, Finland. But so 30, and I have to think that's pretty rare. I've seen some great gray owls, and they ain't 33 inches, and so I suspect they could grow, or when flying in flight, from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tail could be 33 inches. But standing on the ground, they're not 33 inches tall. So when people say they see a 4-foot tall owl, they're describing something that's impossible. Given what we know about owls. And I think owls, unlike, Bigfoot, are pretty extensively researched. I don't think there's an undiscovered breed of owl that just happens to be 4 foot tall that's only seen by people who have missing time. When I did a presentation at a UFO conference. I only did this once, and actually it's really funny. I have them downstairs, so I had it behind stage, and I made these things out of cardboard. So I would start, and I had a 26 inch tall owl made out of cardboard. It's just a flat cardboard owl. I painted it, so I'd pull that out on stage, and I'd set it there and I'd stand next to it and said, "This is a 26 inch tall owl, and that's about as tall. If someone said they saw an owl this tall, I'd give it to them. Right? That's sure enough. Sure, there could be an owl that big in northern latitudes." Not down in the jungles. The owls get smaller down there. But that's not what people are reporting. They're reporting 4 foot tall owls. And I pull out this 4 foot tall owl, and everyone gets a big laugh out of everyone in the audience. And then what I did is I took that 4 foot tall cardboard owl, and I went out into a lonely road near where I was living, and at night, and I pulled up right in front of it with the headlights on, because what people are reporting is pulling right up to the owl, and the owl peering over their hood of their car. I've heard that over and over again. And when I was in the audience, when I was doing that presentation, people came up to me afterwards and said, when you showed that slide of the owl, it's kind of funny, right? People laughed at it and stuff like that. Here's this cardboard owl, and I'm parking the car in front of it. People physically jumped in the audience. They physically flinched. And then a couple of people came up and talked to me, and there's this, one guy drew this beautiful picture of, he sent it to me after the book came out. And if I had had it beforehand, I would have included it. But of the owl that he saw, and his wife came up to me. He was actually thanked me because basically he said that picture was exactly what I had drawn. And I stood there on stage and said, this is what gets reported over and over again. The owl standing in the road, and your car pulls right up to it, and it's bigger than it should be, and it looks over the hood. And the image he drew matched what I was describing. And I said, I get this all the time. And he was grateful because his wife was sitting next to him, and she kind of said, "Oh, my husband's not crazy," kind of thing. So
that's always a plus.
Yeah,
but it makes you wonder too. I mean, we know owls exist. Obviously, we study them.
Big owls exist. Yeah.
Right. We know these are real creatures. Yet people see versions of owls or see owls do things that they couldn't possibly do or just don't exist. And when you tie that into cryptid research, you got to wonder if there's some paranormal element here, and this is what also creates, Bigfoot encounters and stuff.
Yeah, I don't say as much in the book, but I agree. I think that Bigfoot no one's ever going to catch a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Though I think Bigfoot can appear physical and leave footprints and leave hair and stuff like that. So, I mean, it takes on a physical...
It's some kind of in-between state.
It is, and that's nobody likes that, no scientists, nobody likes to think that there's an in-between state where it's either we're here or we're there, it's like we're on this side of the room or we're on that side of the road. We can't be floating in the middle of the room somehow or between the walls somehow.
It's got to be either or.
Exactly. But there's a story in the book where this woman, this is another one of those long, complicated ones where she's like, it's pouring down rain and she gets this thought, I got to walk the dog. She's never walked the dog in the rain. So she gets her dog and they walk in the rain and it's pouring down rain. It's just a normal thing, total downpour. And she goes I'll walk out on this pier. So she walks out on the pier and she gets halfway down the pier and she's like, what am I, crazy? I want to turn around and go home. And she turns around and there's a big owl on the pier. And the dog is usually completely spastic and barks and would chase birds and squirrels. And so there's this big owl and she stands in front of it and the dog like in this reverent way sits in a perfect pose. And she said it was like the dog's reaction, she said it was like meeting royalty, like the summoned by a royal owl. And she stands in front of this owl and eventually it flies away. And then her life, a whole bunch of things in her life happened after that. And she was an abductee. She's a UFO abductee. So, and she's just a smart person. I had long conversations on the phone with her and she's like, I looked up every conceivable owl in every book and it was nothing matches. And I knew where she lived and it's like, there's really not that many owls that can be that big. And it's really funny. It just it didn't really sink in. How does, she's like, well, I just couldn't figure it out. And she knew all about owls. She knew about, she'd seen great gray owls and she'd seen snowy owls and stuff like that. And it's about the only two that can get that even nearly that big. And she's like, it just didn't match any owl I saw. And there I stood right in front of it for 10 minutes or so. And it's just how do you back engineer that? I mean, what was she standing in front of? And why was it there? When it's pouring down rain, how did it fly away at the end, right? If this is a screen memory and it's a little gray alien projecting itself as an owl, then why does it fly away? Wouldn't it just sort of vanish, or wouldn't the owl walk onto its flying saucer? It's so mysterious.
I guess my thing too is, why do we have to jump to aliens? Maybe the aliens are just as much of a screen memory as the owls.
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe, it's the whole, all of reality is a screen memory in one way when you, go down that road.
It's camouflage.
Yeah. And I say alien and I don't know if I say it in the book, but I'm very cautious when I use that word. In the dictionary, alien can also mean, it has the baggage of being, it's coming from another planet, but it also means one of the definitions, I'm doing this off the top of my head, is something so different as to be unknowable. And I think that's a good I stand by that definition of alien when we talk about aliens. So
Yeah.
I have no idea. I suspect that perhaps there's like a other planet kind of thing that's tied into this whole thing, and but that's a good starting point. That starting point falls apart at a certain point.
Well,
Yeah,
I think when I had you and Aaron on it at some point, I had said that whatever this is behind this phenomena is truly alien. It just doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. It's alien to us, to our intellect, to our ability to perceive it directly.
Yes, exactly.
So the question becomes, why owls? Why not, I don't know, dogs? I mean, people see ghost dogs and these big black hounds, but they don't have the same impact that owls do.
I mean, that was, I don't know how many times I typed that, why owls, question mark, So, I mean, it's over and over. It's in the last paragraph of the book, and in the first paragraph. And it repeats itself, so the short answer is I have no idea. I can't answer that. I have no idea why owls. I can dance around it a little bit and take some guesses. And one of the good guesses would be, or at a certain point, I stumbled. I didn't stumble on it. It sort of arrived in my lap when I was talking to a woman who was channeling an owl. Right. So she wrote this book. She's a wonderful woman. She's her name is Jacqueline Smith, and she's not one of the Charlie's Angels from the 70s, a different spelling. And she is an animal communicator, and she wrote a book where she channeled from animals. She's channeled like a sea turtle and cats and dogs and I think even a butterfly and she also channeled an owl. So in this book she channeled, I remember I picked up the book and I was like, I gotta read this. And she channeled an owl. This is great. And she wasn't channeling necessarily the owl itself, but almost like the star being spirit that incorporates. So basically, like when she channeled the owl, she was channeling like this disincarnate alien entity that was a amorphic light being in some other realm, and chose to come here as an owl. And it says the owl suited our nature. This owl suits us well. This owl body suits us well, and we like it. And it was just this trippy, weird, I mean, kind of classic channeled stuff where it was a little bit hard to follow, something like I'm from the fifth dimension beyond the fifth dimension.
Yeah.
But she said a few gems in there, and that's included in the book. And so I called her up, and we talked for a long time. I'd met her at a UFO conference, and she's a super sweet woman. And she, in the middle of talking, I was like, listen, like if you walk down the path and see that owl again, because the channeling took place when she was walking down a path near her home. There was an owl on a branch, and she basically telepathically said, "Hello, Mr. Owl, may I have a talk with you?" And then this channeled dialogue then ensued. What I said to her was like, "Listen, if you come across that owl again, like I want to know. I want to hear about it. I want to know what it has to do with the UFO thing." And so as she's talking, and replying to me, all of a sudden she starts talking really slow and halting. And I'm so glad I recorded this when we spoke on the phone. And she actually sort of mumbled kind of words, as if there was as if words were so limiting as a way of communicating. And she said the wisest thing I had heard in all the research, and it just completely was like, oh my God, she like put the one puzzle piece in that clicked in perfect, and everything makes place, where she said the owls are an archetype. She gave this beautiful definition of an archetype. I could look it up. I'll just do it. I'll paraphrase it. Where an archetype is like something that's known at a deep level subconsciously in our souls. And the owl as an archetype is showing up the owl is showing up because we can tap into the archetypal power of the symbol of the owl and know it intuitively at a deep level. We may not know it at all on a conscious level, but we are absorbing something at a subconscious level. And that was perfect. It was like, that makes so much sense. And I don't know whether it's true or not, but what it did was it was one of the juicier clues in the research of this book. And from that point, as I said before, the puzzle pieces just clicked so cleanly together at that point. And so that would be my answer. Why owls? The question is why owls? The answer might be that owls have an archetypal power that is influencing the observer for some reason. I can only speculate what that reason might be, but that it's influencing the observer for some reason at a subconscious level.
Okay. Yeah, that was definitely one of the chapters where I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what to do with this information. Not because it wasn't interesting, but because it's such an odd source.
Well, the only source, the source with Jacqueline Smith.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was like one of these things where it was like, I don't know, like it's all weird, right? So like, how do you back
where
off
do you
and
draw
say,
the
like,
line on weirdness?
Yeah, where do you draw the weird line, the crazy line? I mean, everyone has a crazy line. You put it in the sand and like, I'm not going across that crazy line. And then something happens and it's like, well, now that I've met enough channelers, I guess there's some thing to this channel. So I don't say she's right or wrong. All I'm saying is that, is that it led me down a path. And I felt just like it's what about the people, like, what about the woman who, like, in the parking lot of the suburban shopping mall sees an owl on a lamppost, and the owl looks down at her and says, this is an abductee, someone who's having a lot of abduction experiences, and she looks up, she's full daylight, owl at a lamppost in a suburban parking lot, she looks up and the owl telepathically communicates to her, you are not who you seem to be. Like, wow, I mean that's like perfect, right? I mean, if like the scriptwriter wrote that, that everyone in the room would go, yeah, thumbs up, yeah, that's really weird. That's so open ended, and that just leaves you thinking. And that's like well, that's exactly what the mystic would say, like, or how do you say it? Like, when King Arthur's on the trail, on the path, and he meets some old crone there, and that's all the So, yeah, So yes, I mean, I was not hesitant at all to put that in there, because at that point I'd like, it's like, God, it's all weird, How do you separate the non-weird stuff?
Fair enough. And you're very open about it, which is good.
And I don't feel like I'm locked into anything.
Yes, well, you approach it skeptically, without closing anything out.
And I think even in that chapter with the channel thing, I kind of leave myself an out and kind of say, not so much leave myself an out, but like voice the skepticism that I suspect the reader would be having. Yeah.
So there was something that happened to me, and you bring it up.
Oh yeah, let's go.
It's not anything major, but it was just an odd thing. We were shooting. I made one paranormal movie.
Oh, I remember this. I watched it. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, Gateways to Magonia.
Yeah.
And there is a scene in there where we're in Trumansburg here in Teganic Park, and we went out into like a very isolated part of the trail with a set of what looks like very ancient-looking stairs. And there's stone stairs, and all of a sudden everything gets dead quiet, and we're just about to shoot, and then we just hear this beeping, and we just kind of stop, and we're like, what the hell is that? I mean, there's nothing around. And it didn't sound mechanical, but it was really hard to pinpoint what the beeping was. And, it went on for a while, and I think you can actually hear it in the movie, because I think it was still happening very faintly in the movie when we shot. And you talk about this, and I had gone home, and I'm like, okay, there's got to be an animal that makes a beeping-like noise. And the answer was a saw-whet owl.
Which is also perhaps the cutest animal on the planet. I mean, kittens don't hold up. I mean, this is the cute factors out over the top. I've seen a saw-whet owl close up. Yes, so saw-whet owls make this somewhat, a mechanical might be the right way to say it, but it's just this perfect tone. Beep, 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 beep. Sounds like a Prius backing up or something like that. Not like a big greasy truck. I mean, it's like a tidy little thing, So, oh my gosh, go down. So there is a little chapter, and it's called Beeping UFOs or Beeping Owls or something.
And I think I actually also looked up Beeping UFOs when I had gotten home after seeing it was the owl. I'm like, I don't recall if there's any cases of beeping UFOs.
There are lots of cases of beeping UFOs. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, so it could have been a UFO, it could have been an owl. You recorded it.
Yeah, we recorded. I'm pretty sure it was an owl. It didn't.
Okay. So if you recorded it, I need to. You need to get a hold of this woman, Lindy Tucker, and make sure she gets a copy of that. I'll make this happen at some point. So there's a researcher. Her name is Lindy Tucker, and she's she in the 1970s was seeing a lot of UFOs near her home, and also hearing this weird beeping noise. Now this was a hard chapter to write because it's like, to make it succinct, and it got a little clouded and stuff like that. So she's collecting these stories she eventually started collecting recordings, but she made a recording of this beeping noise, right? So there's UFOs around. She goes in the forest, there's a UFO hovering above, and she's recording this beeping noise. I think that's correct. This took place in Ontario. So, and this noise is a little bit mechanical, but very. So she was recording a UFO. Mm-hmm. She somehow, under synchronistic circumstances, started collecting a lot of these recordings. Someone else in Seattle, she was on the East Coast, someone else in Seattle, I think it might have been Seattle, in the Seattle area, was also collecting these recordings in the 70s. And when they got together and compared recordings, so then they had they each had 5 or 6 recordings that they'd collected, police officers leaving their radio on, kind of things. Then they had double that amount. So that she's got quite a collection of these recordings. Now, the Condon report said, in the report, they said, we have done an analysis of the sound of the UFOs, and we have concluded through these multiple recordings that these are the calls of a saw-whet owl. You listen to a saw-whet owl side by side with these beeping recordings. They're close, but even if you just carefully listen, there's the owls have a little more flute-like quality, and the UFO has a little more mechanical quality. Someone did exhaustive research comparing and contrasting the audio that was collected by Lindy Tucker and this fellow from Seattle, the Seattle area, and he used all kinds of advanced recording equipments and stuff like that, or analytical stuff at the time. This would have been the mid-90s. Now, it's so she tried to find out, contact the Condon report and tried to find out, wait a minute, can I hear the files you listened to, and couldn't get anywhere. But somehow they, in the Condon report, said, we have analyzed the sounds of UFOs, and we have determined that it's not a UFO, it's a saw-whet owl. She never heard any of those recordings, but she was collecting noises that obviously could be mistaken for a saw-whet owl under advanced analysis, where they look at the little audio signature sine wave of the researcher feels conclusive. I think his name is Ronald Stearman. Feels that he could say with some degree of conclusiveness that that these are 2 different noises. Now, in the very first recording she made, the recording that took her on this long spiraling journey, she also, on that recording, is a great horned owl is on that recording. So you're listening to the beep. I wish I had it here. I could play it for you. I do actually have it here, but I'm not going to try to do it and talk at the same time. So it's worth listening to. If your listeners, there's a website called Beeping UFOs. Just go there, and it says look up recordings or audio. It's amazing. So, but there's very clearly you can hear a great horned owl overlapping with this beeping noise. So here's the owl is already part of the story, right? But here's a real owl. I've always wanted to get a photograph, right? I want to get a photograph of an owl on a branch, and in the background is a flying saucer. I don't have that photograph, but I do have this recording, which is amazing. Now, to make the story even weirder, Lindy Tucker, in the mid-90s, this is ancient history, right? So she was doing a report for MUFON, and she was going to turn this thing in, and the MUFON had a deadline, the MUFON Journal had a deadline, and so she was a little bit flustered and had to find it and had to get it in an envelope and send it off to the MUFON Journal on this certain day. And so she's in her office, and she's searching around her desk and stuff like that, and she's back in the days when you put a piece of paper in an envelope and mail it. She's searching for it. It's summer day, full daylight, windows open. She sees it. There it is. She puts her finger on the document, the multi-page document. at that moment, out the window, this beeping noise starts. How do you come to any like conclusion of what this means? That is so weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
In a weird way, it is so normal to me at this point because I don't have exactly that story in any other case, but I certainly have things that have the flavor of that story.
Right. But I know when we heard that, I mean, it was such a weird sound. It was so surreal.
Well, if anyone can, please, I would. Now I don't remember that film, but I do remember the very opening of the film has a guy who has missing time, and he kind of comes to in a park, and he's saying, "Oh, the last thing I remember seeing was an owl."
Yes, we did put that in there, didn't we?
That's how the story opens. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a few weird things that happened when we were filming that, like weather breaking just at the right time when we thought we weren't going to be able to shoot, and but the owl one was definitely the creepiest because everything went dead quiet.
Ooh, that's telling to me.
And then there's that beeping, and we're like, what's happening right now?
Okay, I got to watch this again. So.
I don't know if you can hear it very well because there is music over that segment, but if you listen very closely when he's walking up the stairs, and I think it's where he finds his hat. In sort of an alternate dimensional, altered state sort of thing. And I think you might be able to hear it in the music slightly. Because I don't remember how much of it was still happening once we started shooting, because we just kind of stopped and we were like, what is that? Because it didn't sound like an animal. But the longer I listened to it, the more I'm like, okay, it's not, it sounded natural in the fact that it wasn't so evenly spaced. You know what I mean?
What's interesting is so here, just like, I mean, straight up, you're doing this weird paranormal movie, right?
Exactly.
Okay? So just to me, it's just like, okay, like that's enough for me, you know? And and maybe it is just an owl, but I'm like, okay, so and then the fact you said he has that weird Oz factor where things got very quiet, you know, leading up to that seems, obviously there's no way I can come to any conclusion, but boy, you got my interest perked. Yeah.
It was interesting to say the least. And I totally forgot about it until I read the beeping UFO thing, and I'm like, that's right. We had that when we were shooting Gateways.
A movie that starts out with an owl and missing time.
Yeah, yes, it does. And if anyone wants to see that, it's free. It's you can find it on the Where Did the Road Go site. You can also just search Vimeo or YouTube for Gateways to Magonia. Tip of the hat to Jacques Vallée there, obviously, for anyone who didn't know. And it's totally free to watch. I mean,
I watched it once, and I'm going to watch it again now. So.
Just to see if you can hear the owl.
It was very good. It was a great kind of like, it was the perfect, how to say, you know, like it wasn't trying to be like a feature film.
No, we had literally no budget. So
great, I love it. Yeah, I think that's just great. So yeah, that was very good.
So, so we are almost out of time, and there's still a ton of stuff I want to talk to you about. So, yeah, we've been going for over an hour now.
Oh, okay. Oh, so this is the first break.
No, we're almost out of time for the show.
Oh, I thought the show was 2 hours.
No. It just, you know, so.
Wait a minute, when I talk to Aaron, don't we go for 2 hours?
No, hour and a half.
Oh, okay. Oh, an hour and a half. Sorry. Got it.
So, but I'm looking at what we have left, and I'm thinking we should just do a second part to this.
Okay.
And because I don't want to try and squeeze all this in.
Great.
It's just, you know, we'd be rushing through it, and I want to take a little more time with this. We haven't really even gotten to the depths of the synchronicity stuff. Yeah, and I want to get into like the depression and trauma and how it relates to all this.
Yeah. I mean, this is yeah. There was one guy that I talked to who got a hold of me, and he actually knew me through my cartoon work, which I thought was really great. And then he shared this story, and he said, I was really sick, and then when I came out of the sickness, I got a job at an owl sanctuary, and I actually had to crawl in the cage with the owls, and then and then he said, and I was like, what's your sickness? And he kind of shyly sort of confessed that his sickness was a, full depressive break.
Yeah.
He had a nervous breakdown, basically, through clinical depression, which is something I have had myself to a degree. I mean, that's what I want to get more into and how it relates to these experiences. Yeah. But I just loved that he went into the owl cage. I'm like, oh my God, this symbol. I don't know whether I'm just seeing that as such a beautiful symbolic thing. Like he had to actually climb in the cage with the owls.
So your website is what?
My website is hiddenexperience.blogspot.com.
And I love that you picked that, the whole hidden experience thing.
And it's really funny when I did that, because I was at a UFO conference and I talked to this woman, Miriam Delicato. She'd be a great person for you to interview. And she's an experiencer, and she did all this crazy stuff with, it just goes on and on. But anyway, so I sat with her and I was all mixed up and all confused. And I said, what do I do? What do I do? And she listened very thoughtfully and said, you should talk more. You should get out and talk more. So I decided on the drive home from this conference, I would make a blog. And I literally probably hadn't even taken my coat off when I got back to my house after this long drive back from 15-hour drive. I got sat at my desk and I just was like, oh God, I got to name this thing something. And I just typed that and that's what I stuck with. And I didn't think about it. I just blurted. It just kind of came out spontaneously. So.
And because it's so perfect, because to me, a lot of this stuff, it's almost like, you're making a painting. And suddenly you realize, wait, I'm painting over something else I painted, but you didn't know it was there.
Yes, that's a poetic way to put it. Yeah,
it's something that's a part of you that you don't even realize that it's there until something sets it off.
And then when you start going down to start looking into your own contact experiences, there's it's just brutal. The kind of existential angst that arises when you realize you're like, you may have these experiences, like there may be buried stuff, and all these clues start welling up, and these little things that you hadn't thought about for years suddenly become really important. And so that there's
it's all the stuff your brain filtered out.
Your brain, or the defense mechanism of your brain. Yeah, you deny this stuff. Yeah,
it's like, well, that couldn't have happened, so I'm gonna file that away over here. Let's not touch that again. Yeah. And then finally, something like an owl touches your face, and
I've never been touched in the face by an owl. I do know someone who was driving down the road late at night and was falling asleep in the car. This is in the story book 2, where he was literally long drive, and he was trying to stay awake nighttime, driving through the desert, and he had the window rolled down, trying to get the air rushing through, and he was kind of nodding off, and he looked forward on the road, and he thought he saw a log standing upright, and he's kind of nodding off, and he sees this log start to take off, and he literally falls right asleep, and then the owl wing actually hits him and wakes him up, snap. So I don't know if that's another example of an owl saving a life. I kind of included it in that chapter, but no UFO experiences for this fellow. But
yeah, some of these are standalone owl experiences. They're weird. They're meaningful to the people, but there doesn't seem to be anything else connected.
Correct.
Yeah. And the book is The Messengers, Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee. And it's available everywhere I would think, expect to find it.
Correct. Yeah, and I would the best way to do is just go into your local bookstore and just ask the nice person behind the counter to look it up online. You can just put in my name or The Messengers or Messengers Owls, my name and Owls. It'll come right up, and then they can order it. And then you'll be supporting your little local bookstore on the main street of your cute little town.
And you're also working on a follow-up with some of the more expanded versions of some of these stories, so that you didn't make this 1,000 pages. It very well could have been, maybe not 1,000 pages, but I think it could have been 600 pages. I'm juggling right now with trying to make sense of these stories that are, I'm actually getting pretty close to being done. There's some of the stories were just so long and so complicated, and they just led you down this twisty-turny path of, that was the only way you could tell these stories was to tell them in their completeness, instead of editing them down and down and down like I had to do with many of the accounts that are in the book. I mean, right. It feels like I say it that any one of these accounts that gets told in the book could be its own novel, and I was forced, just by how a book like that needs to be read, to really trim them down and just tell the meat of some of these stories. But there's some stories that I was like, oh God, I can't do that. And so these got just kind of, I was going to put an appendix at the end, and that didn't work at all. So
they're going to have a standalone book, and it should read like a set of short stories.
Nice. And you said it's almost done, but it's going to be a while probably before it gets actually published.
It'll be a while, but in the next few months, I think.
Cool. All right.
Knock wood. I'm knocking wood right now. So.
All right. Well, I thank you, Mike. We're going to have you back as soon as possible to finish up this conversation. And,
great. Thanks so much. This has been this is really good because I feel like you are one of the few folks that I think has really tapped into this book in I don't want to say all the right reasons, but I said earlier on in the thing that I wrote this book. Well, maybe it was when we were talking right before we went on air. Like I said, like this was a book I wanted to write for myself, and in a way, this is the book I wanted to write for you. It seems like you were the perfect reader for this book. So yeah, I feel great about that.
I absolutely loved it. It was fascinating. It brought up some new ideas to me, which doesn't always happen, even if I like a book. And for the record, a lot of times I have people on here and I say, "Oh, your book is great." If I say that, I mean it. I'm not likely to pick up a book and go, and then have someone on as a guest. So I look for the stuff that really strikes me, the people that really, interest me and I think are really doing something different. I mean, there's no other book like this book, Mike. This is unique in UFO literature and just literature in general.
Oh, I'm cautious to say this because it was not a channeled book. It was not. I didn't channel it. I didn't go into a trance and just type, automatically.
Right.
I really worked hard and I pushed all the little keys on the keyboard and thought about it as I did it. But I will say that it feels like this book was created, or I don't want to say the compulsion. Well, that's as good a word as any. Like the obsession or the compulsion that surrounded this book in the synchronistic way that these stories landed in my lap sure felt like it came from an outside source. Like I was guided to write this book by an outside source. And when I say outside source, I'm kind of implying that it's the UFO intelligences.
Okay. And we'll get more into that, too, because I want to talk about your personal experiences a little more. I know we talked about them back in 2013 when you were first on, but they're I think, more you expand on them in this book. Like, you've had time to really work on them, so...